Pat's Interference is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
All right, so it is Friday night, and I am not at a bar. I am not hanging out with friends. I am with you, bringing back a Pat's Interference classic. For those who were with us from the beginning last year, our first year with the podcast, one of our earliest traditions was called Andrew Drinks Alone and Talks to Himself. Welcome back, training camp, where football dominates my life, my work, hours, even Friday nights. But honestly, as I said last episode, I'm just happy to have real football back. All the talking points, the projections, the predictions, this and that. You want to call it narratives. I'd love to shoot the word narrative into the sun, never be seen again. But we have football back, and this is good. No guest today. I was hoping to wrangle someone just to go back and forth with about what we've seen from the three practices the Patriots have held so far. But football writers are just like you. They would rather not work for free late into Friday night. So you're just going to get me. And what I'm going to do is something I rarely do in this podcast, which is hopefully go quickly. 7 things I've observed from training camp. Again, all the qualifiers apply. Non-padded practices, only in the red zone. Special teams work. You know, this is not real football yet. But you deserve to know of all the things everyone's written and reported, the 7 things that matter most. I have those. Then we have mailbag questions. I think I answered about 6 or 7. We haven't teed up here in a second. And in this second, I will remind you, this episode of the Pat's Interference podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. And so this is it. You, me, a beer, feel free to grab one yourself. It is obviously the weekend if you're listening on Saturday or perhaps on Sunday, where the Patriots will practice next at 12:30. Without further ado, though, through 3 practices, what have we learned? Number 1 with a bullet. Matt Judon wants a reworked contract, but he will not hold out or hold in. First of all, you don't see anyone across the NFL hold out anymore because the CBA has made it basically impossible. Teams will fine those players into the ground with no recourse. They can't pay back those fines once you get a new deal worked out, which used to be kind of standard operating procedure for players who wanted new contracts. No, you get fined, the fines increase, that money never comes back to you. Now, Matt Judon did not practice on Thursday, the second practice, which is why this is a whole storyline. And we're all going, why is he getting rest on the second day of training camp when he's only in his 8th year? He's the best player. They're not in pads, and Belichick famously runs really difficult practices. Well, it turns out, according to Matt Judon today, Friday, this was all part of a plan, okay, between him, the training staff, the coaches, get him ramped up as the rest of the players are ramping up, but just at a slower speed here for Judon. I will tell you, I spoke to someone close to the situation who said what a lot of other reporters have since shared. Again, Judon wants a new deal. He's only has $2.5 million left guaranteed on his contract, which goes for this season and next year. And that's it. And for someone who had 15.5 sacks last season and 12.5 sacks in his debut season as a Patriot in 2021, that's not enough. Not to mention he's outside the top 20 when it comes to the highest paid edge rushers. And we all know he's well within the top 20 for the best edge rushers in the league. What is he going to do about it? Jeff Howe, the Athletic friend of the podcast, has since shared that Judon probably won't do much. And so far, it looks like that will be the case. But it is the biggest news considering the best player in the team has a very mild contract issue, which could result in a raise. You could guarantee some more money, add some more money into the deal. But according to Jeff, that won't happen. We'll see as it goes on further into camp. Number 2, Bill O'Brien's offense will take time. But I think it's going to be worth it because the results obviously have not been there. And I don't know how this story ends, but I know this story starts with Mac Jones completing 48% of his passes in team drills through 3 practices, and that's what he's done. And again, the results, even as someone who charts every single pass play and who threw it, who was the intended target, who was in coverage, was there any sort of pass rush, I don't really care about these numbers. Part of it's a small sample size thing. It's diluted by the lack of pads. They're in a tight space, which favors the defense. A defense that, by the way, rolled back 10 starters from last year against an offense that is not only installing a new playbook, but has a new leading receiver, a new tight end in Mike Gesicki, offensive lineman, and Mac Jones is trying to incorporate all this. Now, it's not excuses. I thought he would be better than completing 48% of his passes, but this is here we are. The reason I'm optimistic is because while I think you can throw those numbers out the window once we get into real football and you stretch the field, is the play designs that we can't go into detail about per just reporting rules when it comes to training camp. I like a lot of what I'm seeing. And it mostly has to do with the fact Bill O'Brien is going to do something that Matt Patricia and Belichick and Joe Judge were so reticent to do, which was just take the low-hanging fruit, my guys. I'm talking about a higher rate of passing on first down, play action that looks like the run plays you actually call, and then some options for Mac Jones at the line of scrimmage and post-snap, which we really didn't see a whole lot of last year. And when you did see, it was very, very basic and predictable. So the structure of this offense makes sense. The pieces fit. This looks good. Things I talked about in the last episode. We saw a little bit more today, the third practice, personnel groupings, play designs, three-man route combinations in the red zone. The more complicated it gets and complex, the more I like to see from this offense. But again, 48% is not good. And Billy Zappi and Trace McSorley were in the same neighborhood, if not worse. So it's going to take some more time. Part of the reason it's going to take time, number 3, is separation for the receivers is absolutely an issue. And you could go into the season and say, oh, I knew that was going to be the case. You've got, Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker, who has famously been last in the league in separation according to Next Gen Stats, I think since the dawn of time, or at least the dawn of time according to Next Gen Stats. But he's a contested catch eye. You have one of those. That's his deal, whatever. Here's the issue. Devontae Parker has been your most consistent receiver through 3 days of camp. Meanwhile, Bourne, your number 3, and that's the definitive hierarchy. From what we've seen in camp, it's Juju, Parker, Bourne, Tyquan, and then Demario Douglas, who we'll get to in a second. But Bourne, your number 3, Thornton, your number 4, and Mike Gesicki, who's really kind of your number 4 or 5 when you consider how much they're playing with 2 tight ends. All of them have combined for 0 catches in competitive team drills, 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s against a defense that cares and is actively trying to stop you. You can't have that and have a functioning offense. As much as I believe in the structure and the X's and O's, look, Bill O'Brien might be the savior, but he's running out of fishes and loaves already on the 3rd day of training camp, if that's really who he's going to be. And it's because Bourne is getting bested by Christian Gonzalez and Devontae Parker struggling some time with Marcus Jones, who's also getting on the case of Tyquan Thornton. Thornton, by the way, not only has 0 catches, 2 of his 3 targets in team drills have been broken up. So, sure, there's an argument to be made, and it's a good one. It's only through practices. It's in the red zone. Thornton, in particular, is a field stretcher. My counter to that would be a soft counter. I agree with parts of that. Thornton, though, is a former second-round pick who's supposed to be making a year 2 leap. In addition to having 4.2 speed, this dude is 6'3", so he should be able to climb the ladder a little bit or shield you off, not just run by you. And if he can't run by you, use some of those other traits, and we haven't seen it yet. So I'm down on Thornton. I've said that before. I'm not down on the whole offense. Again, we need a ton of time, but this is what we're seeing. These are the early trends so far at training camp. Receiver is an issue. I wrote about this a ton and explain why in the last practice report. Hey, you. Yes, you. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to over-under to spreads, who you think is going to hit first home run or any home run at all. And that's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. I have, and you should too, because there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/Boston to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Let's do something positive, will we? Let's jump to Christian Gonzalez. I said on WEEI earlier today, he's been one of the best players in the field. We saw this in the spring. It said it didn't matter much. But this is a trend now between the spring and early part of camp, and we'll see what happens with the Pats. He's not the most physical player, okay? But I love this. You would think he's a veteran out there who has just very strangely made a jersey change and wants to wear the number 50 because he fits in so well with this secondary, covering players like Bourne, Parker, even Demario Douglas, are all having trouble with Gonzalez because he's a freak athlete who knows how to use the God-given tools that he has. And it's not only that he's allowed 4 catches and 8 targets in all of these different team drills that we're charting, and has two pass breakups. It's that he's cutting off routes when they're in breakers. It's that he's boxing you basically into the corner of the back of the end zone on these fades, and you have no opportunity to catch the ball because he's too tall, long, and fast and quick to get there. Marcus Jones talked about how smart he was after practice. You can already see that through 3 days of training camp. Again, we'll see how it translates against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in week 1 and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in week 2. This is going to be a baptism by fire, but Christian Gonzalez so far has not had a single rookie moment. He's in fact been arguably their best corner. And this is a guy who's getting first team reps and earning them. Now, part of the reason he's getting those first team rips, you know what this means? This is time for another sip of beer. First team reps, thank you very much, is because our fifth item, Jack Jones, has been relegated to the second team defense for now. And what this says to me is that Jack Jones, obviously his availability is in question due to the felony charges. We've all talked about this from his arrest in June at Logan Airport. The Patriots are planning for him to not be available because you don't give second team reps consistently day after day after day to him, where Miles Bryant started day one with the top defense. For a guy of that caliber, unless you have some other concerns, we know what those concerns are, okay? It's the guy might be in court for a while or put on the commissioner's exempt list or maybe suspended by the team or whatever's going to happen. So they have a contingency plan. Jack Jones naturally looks very good, covering second string receivers on a team that's not devoid of talent, but we all know what the situation over on the offensive side is at receiver. So he's taking second team reps. It has been Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, and Marcus Jones cycling and eating up pretty much all of the snaps with the first team defensive corner. Item number 6, the offensive line, as we knew and told you on this podcast, is still no sure thing. Of all the positions we talked about, though, this is the one where we've learned the least. The reason I bring this up is because Connor McDermott replaced Riley Reiff at right tackle today. I don't know if this was a demotion for Reiff, who did allow a couple quote-unquote sacks in day 1 and day 2. But it's notable because, you know, listen to the names I just said. Riley Reiff and Connor McDermott. We've covered what they've done in the past, but these are the players the Patriots are counting on, and you're already starting to see a shuffle. So we'll see what comes up. But those are the bodies that they're working with at a very key position to protect Mac Jones and to find out whether or not he could be your guy moving forward. Not to mention Bill Murray at right guard is still practicing there, a converted defensive lineman, as long as Mike Onwenu is out. So we'll see more in the coming weeks. The last item, not sexy, not fun, but we got to mention it because special teams deserved an overhaul as much as the offense did a year ago. The kicking competition so far is pretty real. Okay, Nick Folk has not missed a field goal. Chad Ryland, the 4th-round rookie out of Maryland and before that Eastern Michigan, has not missed either. You can clearly see that Ryland's leg is stronger, but even today when they mostly worked on kickoffs, Folk is the one kicking off, you know, which is something I wouldn't count on him doing if he somehow wins this job, which we all assume that he'll lose come the regular season, because you could have Bryce Behringer, the new rookie punter, do it. But they're getting equal opportunities here so far, and it's close. Beyond that, you don't want to hear too much more about special teams, but just don't forget that, because we did this 3 years ago when Justin Rohrwasser, then a drafted rookie, was an utter disaster, tattoos even aside, and Nick Folk came back in the last couple of weeks of camp and won that job. You would argue by default, but in reality, he was excellent then, and he's been excellent since. It's just you worry about the leg strength. So we'll see. It's not something to gloss over and automatically put in Sharpie Chad Ryland, because Nick Folk is still showing up and doing his thing. All right, on to the mailbag. Fuad wants to know, why are wide receivers constantly having issues with getting separation? It feels like this has been the case for years now. Is it simply lack of talent on the roster, or can coaching be an issue, more specifically Troy Brown? One note, all the mispronunciations. One note on Troy Brown. He leads the receiver group, but splits his time in practice between the receivers and returners because he's the returners coach. So Ross Douglas, their other receivers coach, is actually with the receivers more than Troy. To answer your question more specifically, though, I'll say that these guys are who we thought they were. You know, Kendrick Bourne is an all-around number 3 receiver whose best skill is probably yards after catch because he breaks tackles. He outperforms his expected yards after catch based on his location on the field. Again, more next-gen stat stuff, pretty much year after year after year. But besides that, he doesn't separate naturally. Devontae Parker, I've already documented his issues with separation over his career. Juju Smith-Schuster, fine. Again, more of a yak guy. So these are the players that the Patriots have chosen. So it's no surprise that these are the results that they're getting. You can still win with receivers who don't separate, which also kind of makes their failure to DeAndre Hopkins, whose big knock was a lack of separation, all the more puzzling. They don't seem to care about separation as much, but it's an issue. It should have been expected. It's just, I think, rearing its ugly head a little bit faster and a little bit worse than we expected. Carlos wants to know, I know it's hard to gauge talent level with just shirts and shells. Is there any position group that stands out in a good way? Is there a position that stands out in a bad way? Thanks. Receiver is going to take it for bad way, but defensive backs on the flip side, not just because they're winning those battles, it's just you just have such a depth of good talent. Like Marcus Jones is holding up at outside corner in a way that we saw him beat Devontae Parker on a rep today. And then also yesterday, just shove him out of bounds, understanding that when the quarterback breaks the pocket, there's no illegal contact. So that awareness, his understanding of how to win at 5'8" versus guys that are 6'3" is really impressive. We saw Jonathan Jones do that twice today, 2 pass breakups against Parker. He didn't allow a single catch on 4 targets. Jonathan Jones was magnificent today. But that's why I feel good about the corners, the young guys, established parts. We talked about Christian Gonzalez. But I'll split the difference here because there's one position group that is both impressing me and giving you cause for concern, and it's tight end. Hunter Henry has been excellent. He is quickly becoming the go-to guy for Mac Jones that we saw in his rookie year. I mean, and I've said Hunter Henry has an argument to be the most misused player last year when you look about how much they asked him to block because the offensive line just couldn't do its job, which was obviously blocking. And so he has 2 touchdowns on the first day. He has 4 targets today. He caught 3 of them in team drills. The flip side of that is, as I said, Mike Gesicki doesn't have a catch, and he's a guy they're counting on to be part of their base offense from what we've seen so far. And behind him, rookie Johnny Lumpkin, Matt Sokol, Anthony Ferkser, those guys combined to go 1 for 6 when targeted today and haven't really splashed in any kind of way. So it's a little troubling to me that you might end up with 2 tight ends on the roster, and one of them is actually a big slot receiver in Mike Gesicki. And again, there's a ton of camp to go. I'm not doing any sort of roster projections right now. The good news is the one tight end who's a real tight end is really showing up in a way that I think everyone expected, not only just last season coming off a great 2021, but when he signed initially. Like, this is the kind of career near Pro Bowler Hunter Henry has been, and that's what we're seeing at least early on in camp. All right, moving on. Charles, any change to your roster projection / depth chart after 3 days? Not really. I will throw out one name, though, because I said I would get to him later, and this is much later than I expected. Demario Douglas, 6th-round rookie receiver out of Liberty, 5'8", 192 pounds, quick as hell. This is a guy that I probably would have had on the outside looking in if I had done a roster projection, and I haven't. That's been done by my colleague at the Herald, Doug Kide. But he's repping with the starting offense every single day. He doesn't get a ton of snaps because, again, he's number 5 behind Juju, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, and Tyquan Thornton. But he offers a dynamic there in the slot with that quickness and at that size that the rest of the guys just don't. I mean, this is a big, big receiver group, and he's a little guy by NFL standards. And it wasn't a play today in team drills that really caught my eye, though we did have 4 catches, 5 targets. Really good day for Demario Douglas. They were running this drill that essentially has a ball carrier and a would-be tackler, meeting each other from about 20 yards away. And they run straight ahead. And in the middle, there's supposed to be some sort of either tackle or you get 2 hands on them and it counts. Obviously, when you don't have pads, you're not tackling. Demario Douglas shook Jack Jones in a way where Jack Jones, in this kind of confined space, couldn't even get his hands on him. And I'm not saying he's going to do that in real NFL action, not even a preseason game. But that kind of wiggle reminded me of watching Gunnar Olszewski in 2019 and 2020 going, okay, he's definitively not the best receiver, not even top 3 or 4 in this roster, but his athletic profile is different in a way from all the other players that he offers something they can't. And that would be an argument to keep him and try to develop him. Obviously, Gunnar got to be an all-pro returner, didn't pan out as a receiver. Now he's in Pittsburgh. But that kind of skill, quickness, wiggle, make you miss ability is something I think they really like for him. And clearly the staff does. I mean, he's repping with the starting offense. So no big changes, but one name to keep in mind. Hans is asking, is there a move the team can realistically make, trade, hopefully, he says, to acquire a wide receiver that can actually get open? Look, I don't think so. Again, they were close with Hopkins, a player who famously can't get open, but is always open. And of course, you saw some sick catch from Titans camp today that went viral on Twitter. But this is just like offensive tackles. If front offices have good receivers on good contracts who can get open, they hold on to them. They squeeze and hug and keep them locked away from the other team because they're real assets. So the other part about this is the Patriots don't want to pay receivers big money. We've been over this. You've seen it. We've all been Charlie Brown with the front office holding the football. When we swing through and they pull it away and you land on your back and you've got Juju Smith-Schuster for 3 years and $22.5 million. And that's fine. Maybe that's, you get a little bit of contact, but that's not a guy, again, as we've documented, who's making people miss. I just don't think it's going to happen. They're betting on Thornton making a leap. Players like Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne may be coming around, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Kendrick Bourne is still traded despite this lack of depth, because it just really hasn't worked out here the last year plus. And you can try to pin that on Matt Patricia, but let's not forget he had the worst camp by any receiver that made the roster last season. Okay, they thought he was their number 5 going into the regular season. That wasn't just Patricia and Judge. It's other people in the organization I've spoken to specifically about Bourne. It was the feedback I got. All right, Jordan, what's your confidence level? Ty Montgomery and or Pierre Strong could be a reliable third down pass catching running back for us. He has his commentary. I don't think they can. They should have drafted Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn come and gone with the draft. Ty Montgomery had a really good first practice. He gets hurt in the second. I just still can't convince myself beyond the fact that I think if he's healthy, he'll get a roster spot. But this is a player who hasn't topped 200 offensive yards in a season since 2018, should be a major part of your offense. And if he is, I think that's more commentary on the talent around him than Ty Montgomery. Okay, I think his days as an explosive impact player are come and gone. If he's your 4th or 5th receiver and running back, that's great. You have 2 jobs, 2 players packaged into one. That's really valuable. It's good value. That's the definition of that versatility and productivity. But I would love to see Pierre Strong do this. We talked about the talent, 4.3 speed. We've all seen it. You just need to see a little bit more. And this is where the pads coming on are really going to separate him, because he looks pretty thin for how tall he is, in my opinion, whereas Kevin Harris is like 5'9", 225 pounds. If they needed a Hulk knockoff or, backup actor, like that dude could fill in a mini version. You need to see it with the running backs. So I think Pierre Strong has the physical potential to do this. How likely is that outcome? I don't know. We'll see. It's a lame answer, but I'd say it's the only one I got. Grayson's asking about Demario Douglas. He wants to know, what have you seen from him? Just talked about that. What are the chances of him making the roster? 45%. How about that? I'd still have him on the outside, but for now, it's really close. And I think he's getting better, which is the best sign, the best chance you can give yourself as far as making a roster. I remember asking actually Belichick about this. I think my second year, how do you weigh your most recent data points in the preseason in training camp when deciding which players stay and which ones go, because if a player, is so inconsistent, do the more recent games count because you've had more time with them? Or do you try to avoid that because it speaks to some recency bias? It might not mean more. And he said, if there's a trending, if there's a trend with the performance, you just speak to that. And if not, then you just kind of have to make a decision based on other factors. Sometimes it's outside of the player's control. Anyway. All right, last one. John is asking, do you think they'll bring in another veteran running back to give some depth behind Stevenson? Leonard Fournette seems like a good fit. Well, he might seem like a good fit, but the Patriots disagree, because he came, he worked out, they didn't sign him, and that to me is as good an indication as any. They don't see a future here for Fournette, who, by the way, doesn't have a future with any team right now because no other team has signed him. As far as, do I think they'll bring in another veteran back? I think this hinges a lot on Montgomery's health. I think they should bring in one regardless, but the market's pretty scarce outside of Dalvin Cook, who right now is hanging out with the Jets, who just got a lot more money and are a lot more willing to spend it. So yeah, I think they'll bring someone in, but they'll make that decision in the coming days, not only just based on Montgomery, but Pierre Strong as well. So, all right, that'll do it. Friday night, time for me to get off of this podcast. Time for you, if you have not, subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast. It doesn't matter. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, everything helps. Support us, as again, we're going twice a week with Pat's Interference throughout training camp, the preseason, the regular season, off-season, free agency, draft. Okay, the more you support us, the further we can go, the better we can grow. So again, a reminder, this episode of the Pat's Interference podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. I will be back next time with a guest, not just me, and probably not a beer. But until then, have a great weekend. The Pats are coming on this week, and we are getting closer and closer to the season opener. See you guys.